When I pick up a book to read, if I see it on the shelf at the bookstore, I pull it off the shelf. I read the synopsis. I think, oh, I really want to read this book. That book starts off with 5 stars. That book starts off with 5+ stars. The stars are literally up to the book to keep. You already have the stars. It's up to you not to lose them. I just woke up, so my hair is a bit of a mess. I got a little alfalfa thing going on here. And the blonde is really yellow today, but that's fine. I just had that thought while I was laying here sleeping, and I wanted to share it with you guys. My last read was a solid 3-star read. That book had 5+ stars when I started it. How did it lose 2 stars? Let's talk about it.
Were the weird black girls in the room with us?
So I just finished this book, Weird Black Girls by Elwyn Cotman Stories, yesterday. So first of all, let's just check out the cover. This is a beautiful cover, right? The tree on the cover is very intriguing. It definitely looks fantastical. I even love the font, right? Weird Black Girls, bold. Kelly Link, the author of Get in Trouble. Cotman's writing is a tonic to ward off drabness and despair. That's not entirely untrue. I will agree with that. That is a fact. There's a tree again. Homeboy can write. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And not afraid to... Wait a minute. I need my glasses. Let me do this right. Look at me thinking I could wake up in the morning and actually read without my glasses. I'm so optimistic that way. So praise for Weird Black Girls. Homeboy can write. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And not afraid to nerd out either. With Weird Black Girls, Cotman stellarly bursts open the thread of black space in fiction, a landmark collection. Okay, Sadiq. And this person goes on to say they've been a huge fan of Elwyn Cotman's work since his first short story collection, Words. His fiction is genius. Those observations are not off the mark. They're not. The last one says... Elwyn Cotman is one of the most original new voices you will encounter. That is true. Like, all of that is true. And it made me want to read the book. It really did. I read all of that very nicely to you, but I did not turn on my camera. So, Reader's Digest version. I'll read the last paragraph. Incandescent with humor and style, Weird Black Girls affirms the promise of speculative fiction, the capacity for the unfamiliar, the unnerving, and the uncanny to illuminate the questions and contradictions inherent in our world. In each of the 7 stories, characters embark on obsessive paths to glory and destruction as their worlds twist and warp around them, careening between reality and the impossible. All of this is true. This is very true. And because of this and other reviews that I saw, I didn't delve too deep because I don't do that with books. I don't need to know totally what the book is about in order to want to read it. All of it told me, like, this could be a 5-star read. This could be a favorite book. This could be 5+ stars because, I don't know, Weird Black Girl. I'm a black girl who reads, has her whole life. Black woman now, obviously, but you get my gist. Okay, that sounds good. Incandescent with humor and style. Those were words. Those are words that pique my interest. Through his virtuosic interplay of whimsy, horror, and fantasy, Cotman takes as his subject the most universal themes: friendship, love, betrayal, bitterness, in a collection that is both elegiac in tone and incisive in execution. Admittedly, I had to look up elegiac, but all in all, that made me want to read the book. Because I've experienced friendship, love, betrayal, and bitterness. One would think that one could relate. So here's what I liked about the book. The writing is top tier. Elwyn Cotman can write. He has a way with words and phrases, and he really makes you think. All of the stories dazzle you with their descriptions, and they're all dripping in metaphors. One of the things that the author does that I actually really love is he bounces back and forth between Very flowery literary language, using many of the devices that we think of when we think of great literature. He bounces back and forth between that and colloquialisms. His character can easily slide into the vernacular, and it's actually pretty awesome. The second thing that I liked was the fantastical. A huge part of the stories in this book centered around magical things happening, fantastical things that obviously don't necessarily happen in reality. You see this magical element throughout all of the stories, but I think that Cotman did this really well with the switching tree, the first story in the book. The tree was known for punishing little black kids, basically taking over the minds of the parents and making them arbitrarily beat these children. It was so fascinating, not just because of my history with trees and switches, but also because it took something that a lot of children who are now grown adults, a lot of us can relate to. It took something and made it even more sinister, and almost as if it wasn't the fault of the parents. And I don't know, that's kind of how I see life. Typically, we do things that we think are normal today, and we find out later on that they were horrible. But nobody thought they were horrible at the time. So can you judge people now for what they did back then? That is one of my favorite stories in the book, and it's one that I will remember, and it's part of the reason why the book gets a solid 3 stars. Here's one quote that I really found fascinating. "Rather than let the tree revel in our humiliation, I helped him to his feet. I buttoned Jesse's overalls, and seeing he could barely walk, let him lean on me as we staggered to the bridge. In the psychotic shadows, I dared, like Lot's wife, to look over my shoulder. There the creature remained infinitely vile and pitiless." There are other passages as well that really sum up, or better yet, showcase the way that Cotman anthropomorphizes objects like the tree in this book. It's genius. And the third thing that I loved about this book was the humor. My man is funny. Whether I reach REM at 3, 4, or 6 a.m., I usually rise at noon for my abbreviated day. Today I wake at 7:30. My housemate Sharonda watches me stagger into the kitchen in my gym shorts. She raises her plucked, fashionable eyebrows. "I guess hell froze over," she quips, a stout woman with the round cheeks, pointed chin, and rope-like purple extensions in a bun. She texts someone while coffee brews. "You is annoying," I chide. "Now finish making the pot. So, can carpe diem." We bicker gently, same as we did in college. An astounding number of my cohort at Pitt stuck around after graduation, with a degree to prove they could commit at least 4 years to something. They fell into sanitation, service, medical library, drug dealing, and bartending jobs as easily as we'd fall into bed at the towers after a night of malt liquor and O-fries. And one of my favorite passages from the book, because he totally turns a phrase that I've heard my entire life on its ear, and I love that. Hearing the news of his death, I struggled to recall whether Owen had wrestled on that show. "Can we give money to his charity?" Teddy asked me on the phone Monday night after the accident. "Charity?" I asked. "Owen's favorite charity. It's in Canada." He was watching Raw as Owen, a night of remembrances and matches in his honor. Owen had a wife and 2 children, and that seemed to hit Teddy the worst, knowing the wrestler had a family. The boy said he'd worn an Owen bracelet to school that day. "I don't know about charity," I told him, "but ask your mother if you can help around the house. Charity starts at home."
So how did this book go from having 5 stars to having 3? What did this book do to me? I'll tell you how. But first, let me drink some water, because when you talk this much, you get thirsty. So now let me tell you. First of all, the title of the book was Weird Black Girls. And I just have a question. Were the weird black girls in the room with us? One story had the weird black girl as the main character. 1 out of the 7 stories. There were 7 stories in this book. They ranged from stories about a person who was dating another person, and whenever he touched him, one person touched another, he went into that person's memories. Cool story. No weird black girls in that story. 5 of the other stories, there was a reunion with a guy and a girl, a white guy, a black guy, a white girl. No weird black girls in that story. There was a story about an activist who was Jewish. There was a black woman in that story, and spoiler alert, if you plan on reading this, you might want to step out the room for 5 seconds. The black girl dies. She wasn't all that weird. Just saying. Another one of the stories did have a black girl in it, very marginal character. I guess technically she would be considered weird because she was at a LARPing event. But do you see where I'm going with this? There were no really weird black girls in this book. And the actual story, Weird Black Girls, which was the last story in the book, which meant that, you know, if you're like me and you really don't like skipping around a whole lot and you really want to be true to the book, which I was sort of true. I actually did skip over one story and then went back and read it. And when I realized what it was about and how I couldn't relate to anything in it, I kind of wish that I had skipped it altogether. It was not my favorite story in the book. It just didn't resonate with me at all. I really just couldn't get into the story. It was a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? There were just some things about the characters that aren't my favorite, and it was very hard to read. And in full disclosure, by the time I got to like the last 7 or 8 pages, I just kind of skimmed them till I got to the end, because it was a hard read for me, and I need to unpack that. I need to figure out why. I didn't hate it. It's just I couldn't get into it. It wasn't telling me the story that I was in the space or mind frame to hear. That's a good way to describe it. So in all, unless like the Weird Black Girls were like reading with me, ghostwriters, marginal characters that you just, you know, NPCs that were just floating through the background, like there were no real weird black girls in this book, except for the first story, which was my favorite. I understand that when people write anthologies, when they do like collections of short stories, a lot of the times they will take either the most popular story or the one that's their favorite, or I don't know how they choose, what's the criteria, but they will take a story and they will name the whole book after that one story. That was not smart. That was a little deceptive to me, because not that I expected all of the stories to necessarily be about weird black girls, but because, you know, that part was on me. I could have researched it to realize that all of the stories were not about the same subject matter. That part I get. I just think that we need to start naming our collections of short stories either something that speaks to the cohesive theme, like the thread that threads through each of the stories. We either need to start doing that, or if you're going to name it something very specific, make sure that there are elements of that thing throughout all of the stories. Yeah. So that cut a whole star for me, because it was kind of disappointing, especially because really only one of the stories had a main character as a black woman. It's a man the author is a black man. He talked a lot about the black experience, and black women in these stories were really very like marginal characters, aside from the very first story. The first story was Switching Tree, and that, you know, the narrator or the main character we're seeing through the eyes of a little black girl who just happens to be weird. So that fit, and that kind of reeled me in because it's the first story. I'm thinking, okay, book about weird black girls. You know, I felt deceived. I felt gaslit. I did. And I know that probably wasn't the author's intention, or then maybe it was. Who knows? And I kind of, just a little part of me feels like, you know, while he may have a complex relationship with black women, he may not love us all that much. The complications feel more like they lead toward the negative view of women as opposed to a positive view, but I could be very wrong. I don't think he hates black women, but I do believe that, I don't think he hates black women, but I do believe he has a very complicated relationship with us, and it showed in his story. At this point, he would still have 4 stars. What made him lose the second star? Well, You can tell a story and you can be descriptive and you can give a lot of supporting information. You can really like lay it on thick. And I like that. Like, I like reading a story.
Sorry. I'll let you.
I like reading a story where the author lets you know that, like, I know some stuff. I'm smart. I know how to take words and I know how to massage your brain with them. I like that, right? I like that a lot. I don't like a lot of that. Tell the story. Get to the point. Add everything that you need to add, but get to the point. It's so funny because I'm filming this and now I've got planes overhead. You just saw my hubby go back and forth. Next thing you know, there'll be some trains and automobiles coming through my backyard. I'm literally sitting in the most beautiful setting ever, and I will show it to you in my backyard where it should be quiet, and it feels very noisy right now. I don't mind the noise from like the trees and the animals, but even the animals are quiet. It's just, I've got planes overhead and somebody laughing 2 houses down. Anyway, you're probably saying to me, yes, right, we get it. There's lots of noise around you. Your husband just walked by. Girl, get to the point. That's how I felt when I was reading this book. Get to the point. Like, there's the Weird Black Girl story is the perfect example of this. It's set in Boston, and the author wants to tell you about Boston. Like, they want to tell you all of the little historical events, and you can see why what they're telling you relates to the story. You can see it. You can see how it relates. You can see how all of the little minutia about Boston's history and Cambridge's history and the surrounding areas, the city and the universities. You can see why an author would want to tell you all of those things. I just didn't want them in a 90+ page short story. I needed that in a book about Boston. I was still looking for the weird black girls, to be very honest, especially in a story called Weird Black Girls. So that really kind of like frustrated me, and it made it very hard to read the book, to finish the book. It really did. It made it very hard. And so I took off half of a star for that. I took off about half of a star. So it was still at 3.5 stars because the flowery language, the literary, usage of of the English language, making it so beautiful and descriptive and all that. It was wonderful, but it was overkill. It was just way too much. I am currently reading The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and I'm literally, as soon as I finish filming this, going to get back to that book because it is so good. And I'm 90 pages into a 250 page book. I've literally read those 90 pages today. It is that digestible. Now, granted, Cotman, in Weird Black Girls and all of his stories, he has a lot of fantasy. What is it with the planes today? He writes mind-bending books. They're fantastical books. He takes reality, he takes, and we've discussed this already, he takes the racial aspect of life or the socioeconomic aspects of life, things that people are fighting against, systems and systems of oppression, things like that. He takes those things, but he weaves them into the fantastical. He takes mundane things like day-to-day life or love and romance or friendship or, betrayal. He takes all of those things and weaves them into the fantastical. So you might be meeting a character who may or may not be an actual human being. It may be someone cosplaying a human being, or maybe it's a human being that, is in a costume. You may meet a person from history. In the case of Weird Black Girls, I think that was kind of his way of, adding a weird black girl aspect to it, aside from the fact that the character was dating someone who he hated but liked and thought she was a spoiled brat, but really she was just trying to figure her life out. But those elements were wonderful. And I did like that about the book. But what I didn't like was how much of that there was. Okay. So how do we get down to 3 stars? Because we still have half a star. That star went because most of the stories didn't have a real ending. Not that I need everything wrapped up and tied up with a bow, but I need an ending. And a lot of the endings were weird. 2 of the stories ended great. Like my 2 favorite stories ended really well. And another one of them, The Switching Tree, I liked the way that ended. because it left a lot to the imagination, but you could see where they were kind of going with that one. I mean, and he could have expounded on it a little bit more, but I think it was fine for me. And then Triggered, the story about the Jewish activist who, you know, basically was living with an activist Karen. It was really weird. And this girl went through a lot with this woman. And I loved the way that that ended. I loved the way that she put her in her place. And that was good. I liked that ending. The rest of the stories, though, the endings were all over the place. And I don't know how some of them even tied in with the story. So that would probably require a reread that I'm probably not going to do. But 3 stars is not a bad rating. And I'll tell you why. 3 stars is not a bad rating because it's a unique group of short stories. This is a unique writer. And he's probably not going to listen to little old me. But if he just maybe, you know, did a couple of things, because he's going to write about what he's going to write about, and he should. They're his stories. That's what's coming through his mind. I just would say tighten up the endings a little bit more. Don't do the bait and switch thing. Even if you didn't do it on purpose, just keep in mind not to do it in the future, you know. And, you know, it's like when you go to a ball or you go to a fancy event, or, you know, you're going out and you get dressed and you have your hair done and your makeup and you have your clothes on and you start putting on jewelry, and they say, like, go in the mirror and just take off one thing. In this case, maybe a couple more things. I take off 3 things might be more the rule, but you don't have to write all that. You don't have to put everything in there. Save some of it for another story. Don't try to put it all in a short story. Write a whole book.
Hey y'all, this is Editing Me popping in. Yes, I have black hair now. I live in a constant state of confusion. I'm just gonna put that out there. If you continue to watch my videos, you'll see what I'm saying. I missed my black hair, and so I went back to it. In fact, I'm in the process of editing and curling my hair at the same time because I have learned that in order to get anything done, I have to multitask. But I'm just popping in because I thought it would probably be a good idea to let you know how I feel about specific stories in this book, because while I only gave the book 3 stars, which I'm ambivalent about, it could have been 3.5. But you figure we use a 5-star scale, right? And really, like, the book that is the ultimate book that just makes you just think about it all the time and that you're referencing and that you love, that book is usually 5+ stars, right? It's like 6 stars. So I'm thinking 3 is about half, you know, for me. Even though we know 3 is not half of 5, stay with me, y'all. The book that's like the ultimate book is going to be more than 5 stars. This one is great. It's good. I'm just thinking that it could have been better. And I told you the reasons why. But I did want to say one thing before I go. I'm holding my phone while I film this right now because it's really impromptu. And I did arm workouts last night and it hurts. So I should say this pretty quickly, shouldn't I? Okay, so what was I going to say, though? I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on specific stories, because I think that even if you don't necessarily pick up this book, you may want to read the specific stories. If you're going to pick up this book, there are definitely stories that were 5-star stories. And I mentioned 2 that I really liked, Triggered and The Switching Tree. Those 2, to me, were 5 stars. Now, there are 5 more stories, so I'm going to give you a really quick rating of the other ones. Weird Black Girl, 2.5. Like, I just did not like it. I have to be honest. And I hardly ever rate anything that low. Typically, if I rate something that low, I don't even rate it. I don't even bother to talk about it because I don't typically like to talk because I DNF'd it, but because it was a short story in a book and I was trying to read the entire book, I went on ahead and I read it. But if it were a book by itself, I would have DNF'd it, to be very honest with you. I did not like it. And part of the reason why I didn't like it is because, as I mentioned, there was supposed to be a weird Black girl in it, but the main character saw her as spoiled. And he didn't ever classify why she was weird. There was another character from history who may or may not have been from history. She could have been cosplaying a character from history. I think he was trying to allude to the fact that she could also classify as a weird black girl. And I said that earlier, but I don't think I was clear. Again, it fell short. I didn't get it. So 2.5 stars for me. That's 3 stories. The story of Owen, the wrestler, that was like a 3.5 star. That was actually a good story. I liked that one. The tournament arc, actually 4 stars. I really liked tournament arc. Where are we? It's at 5. And then there were 2 stories left. Things I never learned from Caitlin Clark's acting class. I actually really loved the fantastical element of it. I struggled a little bit with some of the characters. They did kind of rub me the wrong way. The whole thing was really strange for me. And so that one, I finished, but I skimmed the last 5 pages. Maybe 1. No, I'm not even going to give that a rating. And then the last story, Reunion. Reunion just seemed unfinished to me. Like, it seemed like it was just thrown in there like as an afterthought. It was fine for what it was. It was interesting, but I never could really get into it. And it's another one of those, because the main ones that I rated low, that was one of the ones that ended weirdly. About to burn myself up with the curling iron. It ended weirdly. So that's kind of my take on the different stories. The Switching Tree, the tournament arc, the Owen one, I think that's the name of it, Triggered, were superb. I actually really enjoyed those 4. That's another reason why I would recommend the book if you're into fantasy, if you want to know, if you want to read about the Black experience, or a Black experience, because there's no the Black experience. If you want to read about a Black experience from one person's perspective. I would also like to add that throughout most of the stories, there's some repressed gayness in the stories, which was actually really fascinating. And some of the stories had some very much not repressed gayness. And you will see that in the stories as well. So there was that aspect of it. If you're interested in LGBTQ stories from a Black perspective, how one Black person sees the world, stories in particular from a young Black man's perspective, there are stories, these stories would be good. If you're looking for a book about weird Black girls, I would skip this one.
So that's my review of Weird Black Girls, and also how you go from a 5-star read to a 3-star read. That's it. And I feel like I've said a lot here. Overall, do I recommend the book? Yes, I recommend the book if you like fantasy. If you like humor, if you want to talk about the human condition as it is today, it's a very of the moment book. Some people don't like it when current things are mentioned in a book, but a couple of the stories are set in the current times, so they do speak, some of them do have the language of today. If you like someone who, because he kind of almost sounds like, a Philadelphian modern day Shakespeare in the way that he writes. He does have that going for him, very much so. And I would definitely consider reading another set of short stories by Elwin Cotman if he maybe listens to some criticism from other people, because I feel like I'm not the only one who has said this. I've read some of the reviews now that I finished the book, and I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, especially about how much extra stuff he adds to a story that doesn't necessarily need to be there. The stories themselves were what they were, and I accept them for what they are. I will always do that with a story, but if you could tell me a story in less time, if you can tell me a story wrapped in a package, not necessarily with a neat little bow, it doesn't have to be perfect, but let it be in a package. I don't want you throwing a story at me. Words and sentences and paragraphs are all over the place. No, I need them to be, I need the dialogue and everything to be packaged in a nice package. Then, I want to hear your story. The stories themselves were totally worth reading because they were very interesting. And he does make your mind stretch a little bit, and that's very interesting. So I would definitely recommend this book. It just wasn't one of my faves. And probably my first 3-star read in a long time because for whatever reason, I get very lucky with books. I listen to people when they talk about books and I know what I like. And I will DNF a book if I hate it. So I didn't hate this one. I actually really enjoyed it, but it's just not quite up there as a 4.5, 5-star, or even 4-star for me. It's definitely a solid 3 and for very specific reasons. So with that said, I am going to love you and leave you. I'm going to give you a glimpse into where I'm sitting and what I'm seeing. And I will bid you adieu. Even though I pronounce that like an American, because that's what I am. All right. See you in the next one. Ooh, this is hot. There's my trees and my herbs and my little table, and the sun is going to set soon, and I'm just sitting out here enjoying this lovely Monday evening. So, yeah. See you next time.